I didn't know whether.
Whenever Kyle pushes the button, I just sit here. I don't even have my lower third on. Oh well. I'm just a guy today.
A great guy.
A guy who's surviving on 3 hours of sleep. So
3 hours. Wow.
yeah,
So
yeah.
luxurious.
I know
Triple
that's
what
like
Christoff
2 hours.
had.
That's like 2 hours more than you had, right?
In the last week, maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, folks. Welcome to episode 113. Today we've got special guest Chris Christoff joining us. I'm pretty excited to talk with him today. It's always an interesting conversation when Christoff's involved. And we've got our good friend Marc back on the show. How you doing this evening, Marc?
This evening I'm doing fantastic.
I guess it's still afternoon.
I
We're airing a little
couldn't
early
be
today.
better. Yeah.
That's fine.
How are you, Kyle? It's good to see you.
I'm doing just great, Marc. It's been too long.
It has been a while.
Do you want to take a minute and update everyone on what you've been up to?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. I could, but then I don't get to tell about my pick of the week, which is one and the same. So I've been organizing WordCamp Milwaukee, and that's however you spell Milwaukee.wordcamp.org. You'll find it there. We're doing like a total 50s kind of Happy Days Laverne and Shirley theme, which is really cool. And I have been dealing with 8 rowdy kids and going Pokemon going, and that's really, Oh yeah, and then we put out a new plugin, WP Site Sync, and we're pushing really hard at desktop server 4.0. We have one more iteration before 4.0, and then 4.0 comes out. So we actually have a goal to hit that before the end of the year, and I actually think we're going to make it. So that's my self-promotion plug right there.
Those are some big accomplishments. You guys have been super busy. And I'm excited to see that progress.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing. For all of you who think that hiring a project manager that's really good means that you will have less work, no, that's not the case. When you actually hire a good project manager, you end up with more work than less work. So keep that in mind before you want to be productive and things like that. So enough of that.
It's good advice. It's good tip. Maybe we should just end the show right there because we've delivered so much value.
Yeah, right.
All right. Christoff, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. It's been a long time. It took us 113 episodes to get you. You kept turning me down over and over. I don't know what that was about. You kept telling me you were busy and stuff, but finally you said yes, and it only took a little bit of a bribe. Checks in the mail, so thanks for joining us. And why don't you tell unfamiliar visitors what it is that you do?
Well, I am pretty much like a Mountain Dew drinking machine. So my existence is basically just to serve Pepsi, I'm pretty sure. But so what I do is I mostly do WordPress e-commerce. Back in the day, I worked at Giga Shop, and then that became WooCommerce, and then we worked on EDD. So we worked on easy little downloads with yours truly. And yeah, so now I work also on top of working on EDD. I work at Automotive, where I work mostly on our Monster Insights plugin, which formerly is Google Analytics by Yoast. So it's the world's largest Google Analytics plugin. And I also work on WordPress Core and the WordPress security team.
Awesome. Yeah, you're a busy fellow, that's for sure. Doing a lot
And
of
he's only 12 years old. That's the thing that blows my mind.
Isn't that crazy? I know.
Yeah.
I know. Unbelievable. Kids these days.
I know.
Now that's a copyrighted term. That's I'm gonna sue somebody for infringement on that point. Kids these days, I'm pretty sure I have like a trademark filed on.
I'm pretty sure you can find like 50 episodes of Leave It to Beaver where they say that. So I think you might be wrong.
That was a TV show.
I was gonna say, like, I'm already Googling this. Like, final episode was in 1963. So
yeah.
Right. Marc graduated from high school before the pilot, actually.
I graduated from high school before TV was invented.
What's a television?
All right, we're going to talk about our quick picks of the week right now real fast. My quick pick is just a good blog post that Rami Abraham wrote about his experience transitioning from services to products. Now, he was an employee at a services-based company, Web Dev Studios, an agency that does a lot of WordPress stuff, and then he transitioned over to working for Pippin at Sand Hills Development, and began working all day long on products. And so he just had some reflections, mostly from a developmental and mindset perspective, on the difference between working on client projects and working on product projects. It's pretty interesting. A lot of good insights, as always, as you can expect from Rami. And that's a good post, which I linked to on the Google Plus event, so check it out. Marc, do you have something to share?
Yeah, I'm just going to share WordCamp Milwaukee because today is the last day to get your speaker submissions in if you want to speak. We have some really interesting topics that I've seen that I've never seen before at a WordCamp, so I'm really getting excited about it.
When is WordCamp Milwaukee?
It is September. Thank you for asking.
Well, let me ask. I'll tell you why I'm asking.
Probably next weekend.
I'm actually
it's
shocked.
close. What's that?
I'm actually shocked. I thought WordCamp. So I've been to. To be fair, I've been to at least one WordCamp Milwaukee, and I thought they were normally held during June. Did they move back?
They are. We moved it till September, and there's a couple of reasons. One is that we wanted to have more student involvement, and so that's right after back to school. And then the second thing is, we were kind of hoping it would hit right as the colors were changing, because the colors here look pretty awesome, right? You know, and we've got the lakefront and all that. So we thought we'd change it up a little bit this year. So it is September 17th and 18th. It is practically next weekend. So. Yeah.
And for those who live in the South, trees actually can change colors.
They do, yeah. Or on the West. On the West Coast, it's the same thing. It's like on the West Coast, it's like, oh, we have colors changing. I'm like, no, that's just brown.
There's this seasons thing up there. It's like
that's just brown.
weird.
It's either brown or light brown on the West Coast. So you know.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to make them feel too bad because they don't have abundance of fresh water like we do.
No. You know what? I make them feel awful during this time of the year because in about 3 months they're going to be doing the same to me. So.
I got to give major props though to WordCamp Milwaukee because I think this is the first WordCamp that has a published Pokemon Go strategy guide for the WordCamp.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
I just noticed this.
I wrote that today. Are you talking about the post I wrote today about Pokemon Go? Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
I'm just waiting for this to become an official Olympic sport.
Well, I think that it has about 2 years, and then people are going to forget about it. It'll be like Pokemon what? And so, you know, I want to actually. Hey, I'm putting this out there because I thought this would be a great idea. Is like somebody needs to write an app called Wapu Go because there are now enough Wapu characters within the WordPress community that you could like give them everything, and you just have Wapu going. Instead of actually at WordCamps having people going to sessions, they'd just be walking around in the hallway track looking for Wapu, different Wapu. I mean, Miami does that with the trading cards, but I think if you did it with like an app, so that's my gift to the community. Run with it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I can tell. Thanks for the sarcasm there, Kyle.
You have great ideas, Marc. Chris, do you have a quick pick to share before we start learning a little bit more about
So I'm going to be totally biased on this one. So I've been working on recently was our company hackathon project, which is Support Ally. So it's a site that you can send your users to if you're doing support and you need them to like share like what browser they're using and what their browser supports. So yeah, it's supportally.com.
Supportally.com. We'll have to drop a link to that because that looks like an intriguing project. So this is a public thing that we can take a look at.
Yeah, it's completely public. You can all use it. So basically the idea is if you have a user in support who's like, I don't see this in my browser or something along those lines, and you need to know like exactly what browser they're using and what the configuration of their browser is, they can simply email all those details directly to the support team that they're working with.
Brilliant. I love it. I love it so much. I am posting the link. There we go. All right. So let's learn about you, Chris Christoff. Let's go back in time just a little bit and understand your background. You've got a lot of history in the WordPress community, despite being young.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. You've been involved in a lot of things. So take us back to a little bit the beginnings of getting involved and the beginnings of your illustrious career taking off. And Describe some of the things that you were aspiring to do with your free time and your professional life, and how it brought you to where you are today.
So I started WordPress quite a long time ago. I was in middle school, and I had some free time in school, and their solution was, here's a laptop, don't get us in trouble. And so I started making websites because that was kind of cool. I can make things on a web page change, and then I took on a freelance photography client, and he needed a way of like selling his photos online. And at the time, like I didn't want to be the person like uploading hundreds of photos every week for him. So I was looking around. I'm like, what can I do to make this easier? Like, what can I use so that he can post his own photos? And so I found WordPress. But the problem was is that there wasn't really a good e-commerce solution. There was only WP e-commerce, which was back in its very, very infancy. This is well before custom post types were in WordPress. And so I started working on Gigoshop with Mike and Jay and Pearson and Matt Gates and the other ones. And I worked there for quite some time on both the Gigoshop e-commerce plugin, which still exists, as well as their Code Canyon portfolio. And then obviously we had the Gigoshop WooCommerce fork. And Mike and Jay went off to go work there, and I stayed behind along with a couple of the others. And I was, thought it was kind of interesting because we made this, cool way for people to sell their stuff online. But then one day I saw a post, and it was Pippin Williamson, who I had no idea who this guy was. And he was making this new e-commerce product that was designed only for digital goods. And I thought this was kind of cool because the differentiating factor was that in Gigoshop and subsequently WooCommerce, like the reason like digital support was added was because some guy just needed a way of including a link into the email receipt. And now there was this Pippin guy, and he's making an entire e-commerce thing like catered to that audience, right? So going more into the world of digital than just simply a link, like actually making a true e-commerce product for managing digital products and services. So I went over there and I worked with him for a while. So we had some great fun, and the team just grew and grew and grew. And we made a couple really successful add-ons. We made front-end submissions, which became a really popular marketplace building software, along with a crowdfunding extension, which we don't sell anymore, but at the time it went pretty big. And then I've worked at many places, in different various companies, because I like to work on multiple things at a time. So I started contributing to WordPress core. When Pippin was like, "Oh, you should go help out with some of this," and that was Scott Taylor is like regretting that thing because I think I sent him like 60 patches that release. But since then I've been helping a lot with core as much as I can. Try to go through all the old patches. I mostly in core work on report 43, which of course nobody knows the numbers, so it's ancient tickets. So tickets that haven't been responded to in, at least when I started, it was 4 years. It's now, I believe it's down to a year or 9 months now. I can't remember what it's set at. To make sure tickets don't get left behind. This idea that tickets shouldn't be, like sitting there on track forever without getting responded to. And then I also became involved in Automotive, which makes a lot of really big WordPress stuff. So we make like WP Beginner, we make Opt-in Monster, we make Soliloquy Slider, Vira Gallery, and then we recently acquired Google Analytics from Yoast, so which I work on now, which is Monster Insights. So yeah, it's been a long time. It's been really
So
fun.
you've been also studying at University of Florida, I believe?
Yeah. So I just graduated in May. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science from the Department of Engineering there, which was really fun. Some interesting classes for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. I have no doubt. Do you think you've been developing since before you enrolled in that program, and
Yeah.
different things that I'm sure were covered in the class, but I'm curious what your take is on how that's contributed to your practices and the stuff you do professionally.
So it's really interesting, right? Because I get to experience both the practical, like the side of the discussion of whether college is worth it, like both from the side of people who didn't, were programming before they went to college, as well as the people who went to college to like learn programming. And what I found was kind of interesting. So what I found is that most of the courses in the university that were most beneficial were the ones that talked about like really like high level algorithm design, as well as some low level concepts in terms of like system internals and how various parts of an operating system are made up, and how one programs them. But I mean, if you're going to college, like you don't go to college to learn how to program a specific language. You go there to learn how you should learn a language. And I personally think that the classes, at least revolving around, object-oriented design and algorithm designs, made me a better programmer for sure.
So do you think that there were times in your classes where you were taking in lessons and then looking at what you had publicly distributed and the projects that you were maintaining and thinking, ooh, there's some changes now that I think I should make?
Yeah. A lot of this, particularly in formatting, because the formatting portion of WordPress, right, which is what we consider WP kisses and shortcode, how shortcodes go from being a shortcode string to actually the content that goes in them. A lot of that is really performance intensive. So definitely that's helped me with looking at some of the ways that those algorithms are designed for how they work. But a lot of it also I use on some of our other projects day to day. It's been really it's good knowledge to have like in the back of your pocket. Like you don't necessarily have to use it on a day-to-day basis, but like understanding like different ways of designing an object are definitely useful to know.
I have no doubt. You've been working on so many different projects, countless plugins, countless
Yeah.
custom software projects for a variety of employers, and maybe you could break us down some of the more challenging things that you have embarked upon, some of the things that you didn't expect to be as hairy as they got, or you didn't expect to grow as big as they got. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if front-end submissions was in
Well,
that.
front-end submissions is where you have to start. This was a product, for those who are unfamiliar with it, at Easy Digital Downloads, which is an e-commerce plugin, and you sell digital products. Front-end submissions was like our idea that people could set up like a eBay or I'm hesitant to say Etsy or like an Amazon site where vendors can submit products and those products can get approved by a central source and then they get posted on the site and then people can buy directly from a vendor. And what started as like a very minimalistic plugin like has become a pretty hefty community at EDD, people using it. I would say another good one was when we're at AM we have Opt-in Monster, which is it's a system that you can use to capture emails and conversions from website visitors. And originally it was designed as a SaaS, but then the SaaS didn't work out, so they moved it to a plugin. And I was fortunate enough to be actively working a ton at Automotive when the decision was made to go back to a SaaS. And so evaluating like it was interesting to be a part of the discussion as to whether we should go back to a SaaS. What are the types of things we need to think about going back to a SaaS? And what are the types of features that we're willing to lose, and what are the cost-benefit ratios of going to a SaaS? So that was probably really one of my more interesting ones. In terms of difficulty, I was fortunate enough to work on a variety of security bugs with WordPress. And I think the best one of those, I think that I've seen, and at least that's public and is very presentable, is Nason did a talk at LoopConf last year about emoji setting the world on fire, which if you haven't seen it, I would go watch it. It's a good 40 minutes YouTube video.
It's
Which,
fantastic.
Put in the show notes somewhere.
Yeah. It's really good. So you were involved in that?
Yeah. It was I was toward the end. It was mostly just at that point they had already gone through a ton of patches. I think it was I forget the number, but it was between that and the other shortcode parsing one. One of them had like 70, 80 patches on it. So mostly testing, and at the time working with the formatting component maintainer on going through various edge cases. But it was really exciting. And I think that speaks to also to the WordPress community. When they go, oh, now we have emoji support, like sarcastically, like this is no big deal. But it speaks to what has to be done in order to maintain security at a large scale, very, very open project. Like we talk about WordPress sometimes, and some people like to talk about, oh, there's like a small secret inner circle, like in hiding in a room somewhere. But like in terms of like open source projects, like it's one of the more visible ones, at least that I've participated in. I mean, you don't have like, for example, mailing lists that restrict people to being on, like for example, the PHP community I find personally harder to break into because you have to understand like their structure more to figure out, oh, okay, so there's like a mailing list. Like this is where all the formal stuff has to go, and then it has to go from here to there. Like it's a more like formalized and structured, and for their purposes, it makes a lot of sense. But you know, it's really interesting just to watch all of it.
That's fascinating. So, what are some of the things that really get you excited about what you do? Some of the parts of your job and some of the projects that you're involved in? Or is it starting new projects? Is it some of the features that get requested? Is it solving hard problems? Is it learning new things? What are some of the things that just really
I think I like the challenge of scaling a lot. Like so, OptinMonster and Monster Insights, they both have in the case of Monster Insights, for example, over almost 2 million active installs. And so there's a lot to consider in terms of when you make a change, like you have to think about, okay, so there's going to be some obscure site in the middle of nowhere that's doing something that is totally off the rails, and like what can we do to prevent against, that going off the rails when we make like a seemingly innocuous change. So I find that to be kind of interesting. Most of what I work like on a day-to-day basis is more analytics and e-commerce related. And I really like e-commerce and I really like analytics. So, finding like little insights as we go through all of our customers' sites and stuff like that. I don't know. It's a bunch. It's what I do is really interesting. I'm really happy with what I do.
I have a quick question here. When you took over Yoast's analytics,
Yeah.
Talk about the challenges that you faced, as much as you can.
Yeah.
With taking over a product that already had a bajillion users as it was, and then taking that over and managing that project. That couldn't have been an easy task.
So it was really interesting for me. So we acquired the plugin from Yoast, and when we did that, at first, at least in Monster Insights, it was just me. So I did all the support and I did all of the development. So the first like couple days, it was scrambling to build the site. We need to build the docs. We need to move all the stuff over because there's a date at which Yoast no longer wants to host any of the stuff on his site anymore, obviously. So we had to move all this stuff over, and then we also had to upgrade all these plugins, right? Because now we have all this code that points to Yoast server and now needs to point to our server, and we had to manage doing this without trying to break anything. And there's a lot of users who use Yoast. Right, it's a really big plugin install base. So we had to dive through like trying to figure out how the code works. Right, you have to familiarize yourself with how this plugin works, and then you have to try to make it do what you want to do. And we had to do this all in like a very, very short time constraint to get it done. And we had to get it wasn't just Yoast WordPress plugin either, because he had 2 premium extensions. He has a pro version, and he has an e-commerce add-on. So we had to also update those 2, and those come in with their own little interesting quirks that are in every plugin that are developed. So we had to go through that, and when we decided to do the release of the new Monster Insights thing, we decided to just do as minimal changes as possible because we wanted to get everybody pointing, their updaters to our servers if they're using one of our premium products, or get people to familiarize themselves with the Monster Insights brand before we start pushing huge changes. Like we didn't want to come in and be like, oh, hey, this is now a completely different product. We've got a completely different design. So when we launched, right? So we had that's the other thing. So we had to migrate all of it. That was another really fun challenge. We were using EDD, and it doesn't have a at least officially supported importer-exporter for purchases for customers for sales and stuff. And we had to design like our own system to do this for all of his customers. And we had to work off, and we decided very early on that we were going to work off of Yoast time to make it as easy as possible. So Netherlands time is 8 hours ahead of my time. So when we were doing the migration, we were doing it at, I think it was 8 or 9 o'clock in their time, and it was like 1 in the morning for my time. And this migration took hours, right? So you're sitting there and you're working, and then once the migration is done, you immediately have to go live with .org, because otherwise you're going to have pro users who have one plugin and the light version has a different name. Like it'd be really confusing. So we pushed the releases over to .org, and I think, from my perspective personally, I'm kind of amazed. I thought it went pretty well. Right? You're always going to have people who have broken sites, or somebody who has like something that didn't go expected. Particularly when you have 2 million installs, there's always going to be some person who has some weird hosting environment that is going to break. But from our perspective, most of the issues were relatively minor. Like so, one of the things that we wish we did better in advance was communicate to the users of the plugin ahead of time that, hey, there's this big change coming. Like we're going to change your name from Google Analytics by Yoast to Google Analytics by Monster Insights, right? And you're going to have a new logo. It's not going to be the little Y logo from Yoast. So, I mean, we did the best that we could, right? So we emailed, if you were a premium user, you had bought one of Yoast's paid plugins, we emailed everybody 2 emails actually, one with their username and password for our site, and one that explained the change. And then both Yoast and us posted a blog post as well as did tweets. But that actually speaks to some of the limitations of WordPress.org, right? You can't. I mean, I guess what we could have done and what we should have done in retrospect is we should have done a plugin update that notified people ahead of time and said, hey, this name change is coming as an admin notice. We didn't do that. And as part of my oversight, I forgot to include the change in the changelog. So we had the changelog written for 6.0, or sorry, for I believe it's 5.5 or 5.4, and it said like, okay, we changed the plugin name, but we left a couple things out, and we didn't realize that until a couple hours later, in which time we fixed it. And the biggest bug we had actually was the menu icon moved. So on some of the installs, the menu bar moved from like the bottom of the admin bar to like the top, and it was just like a really weird bug. It was caused by something that was kind of unexpected, but we fixed it right away. And that's what we tried. We tried to do as best as we could to fix it as fast as possible. So like on Tavern, right? Tavern published an article the second, or at least within the hour of announcing the change. And then they published an update blog post like after the fact, after we fixed everything. And we were trying to be, as responsive as possible to the people posting issues and stuff. But yeah, I think the most disappointing part of it was, people we got a bunch of 1-star stuff, like, and they were for like ridiculous reasons, like, oh, I don't like your logo. Okay, it doesn't really speak to how the plugin works, but okay. And you get like the bunch of, oh, well, now that it's a AM product, like everything's going to be paid or something, ridiculous stuff. Like, we have no intentions of that. So, you get a bunch of really weird stuff. But I mean, considering, I thought it went really smoothly. But that being said, there was a lot of process done ahead of time, so that when we did the launch, we had like this 100 checkpoint like list we were doing.
So how much Mountain Dew did you drink during that time?
We actually had to drop. This is a true story. So the site was actually up when we launched it. We actually took a trip to Publix before the launch to go get more Mountain Dew. A full-blown shopping trip for I think it was literally just Mountain Dew and like sandwiches. Lots of Mountain Dew was consumed that day, and was consumed the first week, because the other thing too, and this is the thing that people forget about when they take over a plugin like this, and I blame myself for not thinking about this ahead of time, was you email out all these people like, hey, we're going to change, but then what you forget about is all these people are going to email you back saying, what happens, what happened to because what happens is a lot of people don't read like the blog post that you link to regardless of what happens, so they reply back. So when on the first day, we had a barrage of support. Like, it was unbelievable, the amount of support, like tickets we were getting, just from the pro users and from the free users as well. And that took like days to clear the backlog of the number of tickets that we got. So
crazy. It's remarkable. So what kind of thoughts, and maybe even advice or just speculation on the future you might have on the topic of acquiring other established plugins? Do you think that that's something that that Awesome Motive may be looking to do more in the future based on this experience? And also, what kind of thoughts do you have on other businesses out there who are thinking, maybe my shortcut to plugin success is just to acquire another one?
So I would say, first of all, there's no like shortcut. Like if you're trying to like, oh, I'm gonna break into this market by like buying a massive plugin, like it's really not that easy. You have to have a team, or a person, or yourself have to be, well responsible for all aspects of that, from the business side of actually doing the acquisition to the development side of new versions to having a support team that is ready to go to respond to all of these issues. I know that we're personally, I mean, we're always interested if somebody's got an opportunity, but for us, we're not really, at least in the near future, that is like the next month or two, like not interested in it, just because we have a lot of products, and I think this is also true of the larger WordPress community. Right now, there is a real shortage of developers that are qualified. So like you notice like Modern Tribe has a application spot open. We're looking for people ourselves. Automatic is looking for people. WebDev Studios is looking for people. And so that also limits the amount of growth that you're going to see in both number of products that go to WordPress, but also in acquisitions. Because in order for somebody to come from a completely different market to acquire a plugin, you have to have developers. And even if you're already in the same market, like if Pippin, for example, wanted to go hire, wanted to go buy out, I don't know, Ninja Forms or something crazy, right? Like he would need to, well, I mean, in Ninja Forms case, you just buy Ninja Forms as developers, but in this case, you still have to have somebody to actually do the development. So yeah.
Fascinating, and that's good advice. Yeah, I like that there's no shortcut, and thanks for the breakdown on the intricacies of that sort of process. So Awesome Motive seems like a company that's got a lot going for it. I see you guys
Yeah.
have some really big, successful products, an amazing team. There's a lot of all-stars, great people that I really know and love working on the team over there. It seems to be growing pretty fast. So,
Yeah.
what kind of exciting things do you think are kind of on the horizon for Awesome Motive?
Well, we've got a lot coming. Yeah, I get to say I mean, the people I work with are really, really awesome. No pun intended, but so we've worked on a crazy number of projects that are coming up. So I'm really excited about a lot of them. Obviously, from my area of like what we do, Monster Insights is getting ready for a big major release. We have a huge 6.0 coming out that's going to add a bunch of new functionality, as well as completely overhaul some of the design of the plugin to make it more intuitive, and to also, in our case, by making it more intuitive, it reduces the amount of support we have to do. So that for sure is coming for us. Opt-in Monster is actually raising the prices on Wednesday at 12:01 a.m. So, and we're grandfathering anybody who purchased it before then. And that's like the bigger change coming in that area, because we're getting ready to introduce a lot of really cool features to our pro customers. And we were working on those the last couple of weeks at the company retreat, as well as some other places, and it's really looking amazing. I mean, there really isn't anything else really on the market that really can compete with it. So that's been really exciting to work with. And then other areas of our company, like we have WP Forms, right? We have the competitor. Like people say it's a competitor to Gravity Forms, which it's not. It's more of a competitor to like Contact Form 7. Like that is about to launch like a bunch of new features this week. I mean, one of them this week is international language support for I'm sorry, international currency support. So I mean, we've got a bunch of new like products and that are coming. Like we're probably going to do maybe 1 or 2 new IPs this year, but most of it, most of our work this year is going to be a lot of really, really big updates to existing, products to bring more of what users want and give it to them, frankly.
You've been involved in a lot of big projects. You've pushed a lot of code to some big projects. Can you tell us some horror stories from the past of things that just went terribly, terribly wrong and taught you harsh lessons?
Oh, well, there's one really good example of this, which Pip will never let me forget. So, early on in front end in the FES front end submissions form plugin that we had for EDD, we decided that, well, every other release pretty much was a complete rewrite from scratch, and I forget whether it was 2 or 3 years ago now at this point, but we were getting ready to push at that point. I think it was 2.2 was the next big iteration of the plugin. And we had like literally 100,000 lines of code. It was ridiculous, and we went to go merge it, and it was a diff conflict on every single line because we hadn't done branching properly. So that was a really hard lesson in learning how to use Git properly and making sure that it's been done. I think from a code perspective, one of the more interesting ones that I learned about was I credit a lot to him is Andrew Nason likes to go on track and comment, and he makes really great comments on some track tickets. And I forget what the ticket was, but there was a ticket in which I was, going back and forth with Andrew about the design of a function and how it should be done versus how I had written it. And it really is it's a testament, really, frankly, to how much you can learn by contributing to WordPress core. Um, but yeah.
Cool. Cool.
What was your first contribution to core?
Ooh. I don't remember, but I could take a guess that it was probably a ticket that had to do with Windows IIS support in the menu area. So on certain, I forget which version it was. I was running a really old version of Windows IIS, and there is a way of making it do a fatal error because it would look for a menu file in an area that Windows IIS didn't allow you to look in. So that was probably my first. I think my first actual patch that I think that was merged was probably during Scott Taylor's release, but or maybe it was before the release before that, but I have no idea what it was anymore.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm sure you've had. I know you've had quite a few contributions since then.
Yeah.
So, are there particular components and aspects of the WordPress core that you enjoy participating in? You said you help out a lot with old tickets.
Yeah, I pretty much I like to say I'm the maintainer. There's no actual status for that of the 43 report, which is ancient tickets. So I mean, when I started working on it, it was at 4 years. So like there was basically a list of tickets, like 300, 400 tickets that haven't been responded to in 4 years. Like no response, no activity whatsoever. And this sort of upset me, right? Because you have all these tickets, and some of them are just not relevant at all. Some of them have already been fixed, and some of them are really actually like legitimate like bugs, or they had like patches, or they had enhancements that made sense, but they were just sitting here. So I made like a mission out of going through that report and like responding to every single ticket and making sure that like it got if it wasn't active, if it had already been fixed, for example, it would be closed. If it made sense, it made sure that it was assigned to the right component maintainer. And since then, it's now down at 9 months, which is really good. I think we have obviously more work to do in that department, but I think it's kind of cool to say that there aren't any tickets on track that haven't been responded to this year. I'm sorry, not this year, but like in a calendar year of the last 365 days. So that's kind of like where I like to do. I end up spending a lot of time in the formatting component, as well as in the XMLRPC component. And I love working with the security team, so it's been really fun.
I've talked to a lot of people in the community over the years, and your name comes up fairly often, Mr. Christoff. And it's just interesting hearing you've been recognized. You've been, I should say, recommended by any number of people, former guests on the show, when I asked them who should I invite on future episodes. And you've made lasting impact in a number of areas. So one thing that interests me is that everyone, or not necessarily everyone, but a lot of people mentioning you will make a remark at how remarkable it is that you're so young and yet so accomplished. Does that ever get to you that it's always, and he's so young?
Well, it used to be really awkward, because when I was working at Jigo Shop, right, like you would have this essentially at the time 14, 15-year-old logging into people's actual businesses and hoping that this kid didn't screw up your stuff. It used to be really weird. At one point worked. This is way back. I worked at the Lee County School District, and I was definitely the youngest person who was working at the district's downtown IT server. I was working as a web application programmer, working on some Race to the Top programs that they were writing, and it was definitely kind of sort of intimidating, because you have everybody here and they're probably in their 40s and their 50s, and here's this 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid who's coming in to work, and it was sort of weird. But not really. Most of the web is great in the essence that a lot of the barriers for age are lifted because most of the internet at least is age blind, right? Like if you send a ticket to EDD, right, and somebody from EDD responds back, you'll have no idea how old that person is. That person could be 3 months old, or they could be 70, right? Um, so I mean that's been kind of enabling. But from my perspective, it's been kind of cool because I got to be a part of many parts of various parts of the internet in terms of not WordPress and PHP and other areas of programming, and it's been cool to learn. But I will say this: it is kind of concerning, at least from the WordPress perspective, that at least in my opinion, it's concerning that there is not a lot of younger developers that are coming to WordPress, at least that I know of.
I'd say that's a good point, a good observation for sure. It may not bother you. You may be totally fine with just hearing these remarks all the time. It strikes me as maybe more than it should be, but the more important observation is that it shouldn't be that remarkable, but it is because there aren't that many under 20-somethings
Right.
doing great things or making waves in the community, at least that we know of.
Well, I tried compiling a list actually with TechVolts once. We were trying to do a 20 under 21 list, and we couldn't find 20. I mean, at all. We didn't even come close to finding 20. So maybe they're just out there, and I just don't know them yet. I'd be happy to meet them. I'd love to meet them, but I just don't know where they are. But it's sort of concerning to me because the problem here is you can grow WordPress. Let's say WordPress grows to 75%. At some point, everybody who currently works on the project is at some point going to want to retire. They're going to want to, start a family and not worry about WordPress on a day-to-day basis. And it seems to me at least to be a bit concerning that there's not a lot of new talent coming in to replace the talent that's leaving.
Yeah,
because at some point in time I would like to leave. You're right. So there has
Marc,
to be some,
Marc, you're not allowed to leave. That's just
there has to be some new blood coming in. I find that's an interesting observation because I think that is maybe what a lot of the people are doing with kid camps and things like that at WordCamps is to get them into coding. And maybe WordPress is just one of those things people discover later, but they have to break into the coding aspect of things first, and then they kind of discover WordPress later.
Well, I think part of the problem is like when like for example Mason, a couple of years ago was getting into WordPress. I think WordPress as a product was like a lot cooler than it was, right? Because it was, there's this cool thing you can now blog with, right? Whereas when I was in college, like all of the classmates, what they wanted to do is latest greatest JavaScript, right? Like it doesn't matter that only like 3% or 10% or 25% of the web can run it. They just want to be on the latest, right? And the problem is you've got a situation where WordPress isn't the cool kid on the block anymore. Like it's not the first thing someone's going to think of when they think of latest and greatest PHP. Right. Maybe it should be.
Right. But it's not shiny.
Right.
Yeah,
it's not the shiny Cadillac anymore.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get people who just gravitate toward it because of shininess anymore. And so the way that people discover it now is, most of it, at least that I've seen, is you go and you work for an organization and they are using WordPress, or they're considering using some sort of platform, and WordPress is just another name.
So you feel it's like a branding PR type thing more than anything?
It's not really like a branding. I guess in some aspects it's a branding PR thing.
Sounds kind of like it, yeah.
But it's also shininess, to some essence, right? Like PHP as a whole is not really the current cool thing to do, right? The current cool thing to do for most younger developers, they want to be JavaScript developers. So I mean, some aspects like that gets me really excited about REST API because maybe that'll convince some of them that hey, we can use WordPress as like this cool thing to just use it to store stuff in a database. We don't have to write a database layer. We don't have to deal with one. But yeah.
It's definitely interesting to think about the image of WordPress, not something that I've reflected on often, but its image towards the younger generation. I mean, your observations would be valuable there, as it sounds like it's akin to my experience with social networks or something like that. You know, Facebook stopped being cool when my parents got on it, and is WordPress that kind of thing that, you know, the older professional, you know, generation is the establishment is using, and it's just not as cool and not as attractive anymore.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that changes the minute a kid wakes up and discovers they need to make money. And they realize. Well, I mean, no, I'm not kidding about that. Okay, so when you're 14 years old, it's like, I want the latest, coolest, shiny thing. But when you're 18 years old and your parents have said, you know what, you got to think of what you want to do with your life, they're suddenly, okay, look, hey, 20 whatever % of the web is being run by WordPress. There's some money to be made there, and so it may be that they're getting into it a little bit later than the 14 and 15-year-old, but it doesn't mean they don't have that skill set built up.
I mean, the way I look at it though is, I think a lot of the kids, at least that I work for, what they tend to do is they tend to go off and they work for a company, and in that case, either one of two things happens: either their management dictates the system they're going to use for content management, or the developers get to choose. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a situation, which is probably, I would guess is the majority, but I have no actual proof of this, where the developers choose, you know, what they're going to do, they're going to either make a JavaScript-based solution or they're going to use one. You know, and in the terms of, you know, market for WordPress, you know, I think, you know, and I look at systems like Wix and Squarespace and stuff, and I think a lot of people really discount them for their potential, because WordPress was really idealist in 4 years ago, when like everybody was like really concerned about privacy. But the more I look at younger generations, it is my opinion that the younger generations significantly are less caring about privacy and more concerned about you know, ease of use. Like, for example, a lot of them will just agree to Facebook terms and conditions. They'll open up their MacBook and iTunes will be like, oh, here's a 50 trillion page thing. Just click, get on my way, click, 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 right? Like, they don't really necessarily care as much as, you know, your general older current generation do, right? And so in the future, that poses a really problem, because part of WordPress's core branding is, oh, we're all about open and you own everything, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's a really great ideal. But the problem then becomes, if people don't value that anymore, and they're looking at content management systems, they're going to look at a Squarespace or a Wix or a Weebly, and they're going to be like, okay, there's this WordPress thing, and it's sort of difficult for me to build a website on because I'm not a developer, and I just really want to drag a box and plop it on a screen. And there's this Wix thing which does exactly that. And that's the problem. Like, in the future, like, it's not going to be a shift in the next 5 years, probably not even the next 10 years, but that is the concern that I have moving, you know, with, you know, a WordPress in, let's say, 50 or 40 years, right? Is whether people really value, if that's a single feature that makes WordPress great, that's a problem. And that's why it's, you know, we have to continue making sure that WordPress core continues to get, you know, updates to existing features as well as new features, because you have to, you know, people don't want to say like WordPress competes with like Squarespace, and it doesn't right now, but in 20 years it will be. I mean, that's going to be your choices.
That's amazing. Yeah. Right on, man. I guess I'd never thought too much about the generational shift and the core values that WordPress is built upon and has been.
I mean, when's the last time you've read through the entire iTunes agreement?
Yesterday.
The whole thing, word for word?
No.
I will give you a cookie, sir.
Yeah.
I don't have any cookies, so I'll even take the effort to bake you cookies and then give you cookies.
And I'd be impressed at how fast of a reader you are, because I don't think you could finish it in a day.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
I mean, they probably have like an entire set of like Tolkien novels in there, like just to throw in, just to see if anybody's actually reading. Like, there's gonna be like a chapter from like Narnia in there.
There probably is, and it'll probably never be discovered.
And it probably won't be. I mean, the iTunes agreement, I don't know if it still does, but it used to have language like, by agreeing to this, you agree that if you ever move out of the country, like Apple owns your family. Your family has to stay behind. It actually used to have like something to that effect in there. It was a great, I believe it was the next, one of the tech blogs wrote about it. It's because Apple likes to throw a lot of little parody statements inside of them just to see if people are actually reading them.
Right.
And it used to have like really weird language. But that speaks to the truth of the heart of the matter is, when people don't value that anymore, does it really matter as a distinguishing factor?
Absolutely. And there's not
Yeah,
really any
they're
terms of
trading.
use that we agreed to when we set up WordPress. Anyway, so wow, our time's gone by really fast, and we've got just a couple wrap-up questions that maybe you could answer for us. One, let's take a look at the future here real quick. Where are you planning on going in the next year where somebody might bump into you?
I like to travel, so I happen to be really lucky living in Florida because we have a lot of great WordCamps. So I'll be at WordCamp Tampa, which is coming up in, I don't know, less than a month now, isn't it, Mark? It's the
Yeah,
end of
it's
September.
whatever, at the
It
beginning of
might even
September.
might even be.
It's the week. It's the weekend before WordCamp Milwaukee coming up, September 17th, 18th.
That's how Mark keeps track, by the way.
Yeah.
And
It actually is, yeah.
so I'll be at Tampa. I'll be at Orlando. WordCamp Miami. I don't know if they've announced dates yet, but I'll be at that next year, as well as if they do another one, I'll definitely be at Pressnomics. I'll be at WordCamp US in Philadelphia. But outside that, not really sure yet. Haven't really figured it out. So.
All right. Well, that's a pretty good schedule. That'll keep you busy. Rack up those freaking flyer miles. So, who are some people that you recommend that I have on the show in the future?
Ooh. Okay. Now I have, and this is not knowing what their schedules are. So I have no idea. They're probably like the people right now with like 50,000 hours of work to do left. But you should get Aaron Jorbin on to do a talk about the personalized web, because that would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I could see. I don't think you've done at least Pippin in a while, because I feel like I've looked at the schedule and I didn't see him in like a year at least.
It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, you could do a follow up with him. Yeah, outside of that, maybe you could do like an Aaron Eaton. He works at Automotive, or it'd be also interesting to do Pascal Bercher, who works on that's probably not even how he pronounces his last name, but that's my attempt at it. He works on WordPress Core 2. So.
Good choices. Good choices.
Yep.
So before we kind of wrap up here, is there anything about anything that you're interested in kind of pitching or encouraging people to take action on, or imparting words of wisdom?
Okay, so I'll do two pitches. So first is, if you're interested in Opt-in Monster, the pricing is going up literally Wednesday. So if you want to get locked in forever, you need to like upgrade like now, and you can go to our site to go do that. If you're a Monster Insights customer, if you're a Pro customer, we'll be contacting you over the next months to get into our beta for our 6.0 release. So look out for an email for that. As far as words of wisdom, I would say I am super looking forward to WordPress 4.7 and Helen's attempts at making it better for new user experience. So yeah, definitely watch the progress on that. And if you're interested and you have time, like seriously contribute.
That's a good thing to always encourage everyone to do. So Chris, that's just about the time that we've got today. We learned a lot. I enjoyed our discussion about development, some of the things you guys are involved in. Automotive is always innovating and surprising us with the cool things they come up with, and we always know that you're a big part of it somehow, and will continue to be in the future. I think it's an interesting discussion about different generations in WordPress and how things are evolving, and why you stand out, and you probably shouldn't. Very cool insights, I should say. No pun intended.
No pun intended.
So thanks a lot for joining us for episode 113, Mr. Christoff, and Marc for stepping in as well.
And if for those of you who may have seen my daughter pop in, I do apologize for that. She is not used to me doing a podcast at this time of the day. So.
It's not really something to apologize for.
It was
She's
a
so
little
cute.
distracting. It was a little distracting. I'm like, oh, there's my kid. Okay. one of them anyway. It was fun.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Mr. Christoff, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, definitely.
We
Thanks,
will
Chris.
talk again soon. I'll be seeing you in December, I guess.
Yeah.
Looking forward to
Oh, I just read what Chris wrote. Sorry.
it. All
Little
right.
inside joke. By the way, I just want to say that the conversations that I've had with Chris everywhere I go are like the highlights of any trip I go to. So the only reason I'm going to Tampa is just to see Chris. So.
Oh, the discussions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's a totally valid reason.
it is. No, Chris is a great guy.
Certainly is. And great discussion. So thank you guys for your time today.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
See you later.